What are some ridiculous history facts? Ancient Romans would put sandals on the hands of sleeping people, then tickle their face so they would slap themselves. When the Romans laid siege to Themyscira, a real place, weirdly enough, they attempted to tunnel into the city. The Themyscirans released bears into the tunnels. The Spartans never built a city wall, figuring that their reputation alone would mean no one would dare attack them. But during the Persian War, the Persians, who had already burned Athens twice, hired a Greek guy to take them to Sparta. But when they got there, they saw a kinda crap-looking city without even a wall. They figured there was no way this place could be the mighty Sparta they had heard so much about. So they figured the Greek was lying and thus Sparta was spared. Edit. I'm remembering this from reading it in the book Persian Fire by Tom Holland. It's quite possible that I'm misremembering details or that Allen's text identifies this as a legend or story. Still, the book is a fantastic read and I heartily recommend it. Claudius Drusus died in AD 20 from asphyxiation when he tossed a pear in the air and caught it in his mouth. The pear tree was put on trial, found guilty of murder, and destroyed. The first bomb dropped on Berlin during WW2 claimed no human casualties, but it did kill an elephant. In ancient Egypt, servants were smeared with honey to attract flies away from the pharaoh. The Battle of Bull Run, during the American Civil War, was called the Picnic Battle, because so many civilians from Washington went on picnics on the sidelines and watched. But once the battle actually started, and the Union started to get its ass kicked, they all ran away, running over injured soldiers and dead bodies and generally disrupting the battle. This was actually a relatively common thing during the Civil War. I know it happened at Gettysburg too. A Chinese emperor escaped an assassin by running around a pillar. After 2 hours, the assassin got bored and went home, and wasn't charged for his crimes. At U.S. President Andrew Jackson's funeral in 1845, his pet parrot had to be removed because it was swearing. At one time there was not only a pope and an anti-pope but also a counter-anti-pope. Colombia has a period in history literally called the Dumb Homeland Period because of how incredibly dumb politicians acted at the time. During the most critical portion of WWII, the Japanese thought they had sunk or disabled 3 American carriers when, in reality, they had only bombed the USS Yorktown 3 times. They were caught with their pants down when the bombs started landing at Midway. The shortest war occurred between Zanzibar and the British Empire, lasting around 45 minutes. During WW2, a bunch of German soldiers got separated in rural Russia. They were trudging through snow with no food or water for days before finally finding a supply drop that missed its mark. They opened it up and found only black pepper and condoms. Edit. For anyone wondering, my source for this is Storm of War by Andrew Roberts. Unfortunately I can't remember the page number because I read the book a few years ago, but I believe the chapter is called Clash of the Titans. I'm sorry I don't have a more exact source, but I'm a random commenter, not a history teacher. When the Netherlands was occupied by Nazis in 1940, many people fled to Canada, including Princess Juliana of the Netherlands and her husband, Prince Bernhard of Lippe-Biesterfeld. Their daughter, Princess Margriet, was born in Ottawa, not knowing if the baby would be male, and hence the heir to the throne. Canada declared the maternity ward of the Ottawa Hospital extraterritorial, which means it became international territory. This meant that the baby would derive its nationality only from its mother, making it 100% Dutch. There used to be bread stamps burned into a cooked loaf of bread, to avoid bread fraud, as the government supplied the wheat flour, but some bakers tried to use sawdust and other ingredients in the bread to make the wheat last longer. The bread stamps were baker-specific, so they could track down where any tainted bread came from. If they were caught, they had to move to another town to make bread, or wait 3 years to continue making bread, if I remember correctly. As St. Lawrence was roasted to death on a gridiron, he is said to have remarked to his torturers, "I am cooked on this side. Turn me over." St. Lawrence is the patron saint of cooks and comedians. The longest ever U.S. presidential inauguration speech was made by William Henry Harrison on March 4, 1841. The day had terrible weather, yet Harrison chose to deliver his speech nonetheless, running 8,445 words. In fact, the speech was so long, and the weather so terrible, that Harrison caught pneumonia and died on April 4, making him the shortest reigning U.S. president ever. The Cadaver Synod, aka the time a pope dug up another pope's corpse, put it on trial, found it guilty, had it reburied, dug it up again, and chucked it into the river. So, Pope Stephen VI really hated the guy that was pope before the guy that was pope before him, aka Pope Formosius. I believe their relationship would be called Pope Twice Removed. That line will work on 2 levels in just a second. Anyways, so Stephen VI super hated him. It was pretty much all because of powerful families and politics and grudges. Still, Pope is a literally lifelong gig, and that means the guy he hated had been dead for a bit by the time Stephen VI became Pope, 7 months. So what did Stephen VI do? Why, he dug up the dead previous pontiff and put his remains on trial. Of course, he was found guilty, stripped of his garments, had 3 fingers removed, they were his blessing fingers, was redressed in peasant garb, and reburied in a pauper's grave. This didn't feel like enough for old Stevie V, so he dug him up again and had him chucked into the Tiber River. Stephen VI was then in prison for the whole thing and later strangled. Canada and Denmark have been playfully fighting for control of a tiny island near Greenland called Hans Island for decades. When the Danish visit, they leave a bottle of Danish schnapps liquor. When the Canadians visit, they take the schnapps and leave a bottle of Canadian Club whiskey and a sign that says "Welcome to Canada." Montenegro technically was in war with Japan for 101 years, and they signed a peace treaty in 2006. Montenegro was allied with Russia in Russo-Japanese War, and they declared war on Japan, but they forgot to peace. It is told, by Herodotus, that when Xerxes invaded Greece he had to build pontoon bridges, which were destroyed by a storm before completion. Xerxes was so upset at what happened that he had every engineer beheaded and sent soldiers down to whip the sea 300 times for its failure to obey him and comply with his plans. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams died on the same day, July 4, 1826. The 50th anniversary of them both signing the Declaration of Independence. Adams's last words were, "Thomas Jefferson survives, he was wrong by about 5 hours." Ancient Greek and Roman marble statues were actually originally painted and were colorful. A lot of the statues' paint faded away and went away over time. Some people cleaned off the paint thinking it was debris or dirt, and other people just plain cleaned and removed all of the paint off of them because they preferred the look of white marble. Rome was actually a very colorful city, and it wasn't all made of just boring plain white marble. Stalin used to take people on the side to have some drinks with them or invite them to join him for a vacation in his holiday home. Khrushchev wrote about how much he hated those drinking breaks and vacations. Of course, Stalin would try to get you drunk and get info from you, and could decide he wants to kill you during the vacation, but you can't really decline his invitation. Khrushchev would also try to subtly get Stalin drunk as well and get info from him. One time during a vacation with Stalin, Stalin asked him to dance a Ukrainian folk dance in front of a bunch of people. Khrushchev hated dancing, but he had to do it. A very high-ranking Nazi, Ernst Röhm, was gay, was killed 1934, and Hitler knew about it, but it didn't bother him. Funny how homosexuals were then put in concentration camps. The Massachusetts colony banned celebrating Christmas. During that time period, many people used it as an excuse to get hammered and party. Another tradition was that the young adults would cross-dress, then go door to door singing songs and demanding food. This clearly doesn't fit with Puritan lifestyle, so the governor banned public celebrations. People could still celebrate it in their homes if they didn't get too rowdy. I think it was unbanned when Massachusetts became a state, but didn't become mainstream until Christmas became a national holiday. Nashville briefly legalized prostitution during the Civil War. Union soldiers stationed there kept getting syphilis, so to know prostitutes were put on a large barge in the river. I'm a little fuzzy on what happened after that, but no, it didn't work very well. So it was legalized and prostitutes had to be registered or get a license. I can't remember which, and were required to have STD checks. This lowered the amount of prostitutes with syphilis because it was getting caught and treated. That lowered the amount of soldiers getting syphilis and made the army happy. It was outlawed shortly after the war ended though. Ronald Reagan was a prolific lifeguard when younger, saving 77 people from drowning. Herostratus is the guy who burned down the Temple of Artemis. The only reason he did it was to have his name written down in history. Before Abraham Lincoln became a politician, he was a champion wrestler with more than 300 bouts under his belt. Lincoln only lost one match in his career and was inducted into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame in 1992. There are literally entire books of anecdotes of this sort on Ben Franklin. That man was the OG of trolling. He was so good at trolling under the pen name of a female, Silence Dogood. He received several marriage proposals. Only then did he reveal her true identity. General Omar Bradley was stopped by MP during the Battle of the Bulge in WW2 due to them thinking he was a Nazi infiltrator. The irony was that he was stopped because he correctly identified the capital of Illinois as Springfield when the officer thought it was Chicago. In the book, The Art of War, I read about a Chinese general whom, after defeating his enemies, invited them all over for dinner. They accepted but were cautious. At the dinner table, the other men were skeptical because they had thought that the general was going to poison them. This was far from the truth. The general actually retired his enemies by giving them a place to stay. Riches and women, they never betrayed him. Make friends with your enemies so that they don't betray you. We'll get more info later, but if anyone can do me the favor, that would be great. Edit. It was actually the 48 Laws of Power that I was reading, but I believe that the author, Robert Greene, took some inspiration from The Art of War. My mistake. Edit 2. Wow, my very first silver award ever. Thank you, awesome stranger. Edit 3. Here is a quick summary. In 959 AD, General Chao Kayuangun became Emperor Sung, and it was probable that he would be murdered in a year or two. Desperate to break the cycle, he invited his fellow powerful generals to a banquet and dismissed the guards. The generals in the room were now very afraid that the king was planning on killing them all, here and now, in one fell swoop. To their surprise and relief, the king made them an offer. Give up your commands and I will give you fine estates and beautiful dwellings where you can enjoy singers and girls as companions. The now relieved generals took him up on his offer, realizing that a life of riches and security preferable to a life of constant anxiety and struggle. Just like that, he made enemies into friends. The British once sent a guy to China as a spy so he would uncover the secrets of making tea. People were buried alive so often in the 19th century that a safety coffin was invented so the dead would have the ability to alert those above ground if they were still alive. In 1898, author Morgan Robertson wrote a novella titled The Wreck of the Titan, or Futility. The plot involved a fictional ocean liner, the Titan, which sinks in the North Atlantic after striking an iceberg. In the story, Titan was described as the biggest passenger ship in the world. It carried the minimum number of lifeboats allowed, resulting in a large number of her passengers and crew perishing. 14 years later, RMS Titanic sank in strikingly similar circumstances. In 1994, a war almost broke out between Russia and Sweden because of fish farts from herrings. That's how they communicate, because Sweden heard the farts in their waters and they thought it was Russian submarines. When the Allies were invading Germany, General Eisenhower sent a message to General Patton telling him to go around Trier because it would take 4 divisions to capture. Patton sent him back a message saying, "Have taken Trier with 2 divisions. What do you want me to do? Give it back." Edit equals derp I'm retarded. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to hear more of the best posts.